our guns, burning up our flag, playing shitty country music. They forgot about the hag. Well, don't you think it's time we all got downright mad? Let's take our country back. Well, I'd rather be judged by 12 than carried by 6. And that's just what'll happen if you rob me to get a fix. No, I ain't messing around. I got no problem putting shitheads down. Let's take our country back.
We'd like to thank our sponsor, Farmer Joe's Fresh Market, located at 1401 Southwest Pine Island Road in beautiful Cape Coral, Florida. This week, Farmer Joe's has St. Louis ribs for only $1.99 a pound, or snow crab clusters for $9.99 a pound. What a better way to celebrate Father's Day. Barefoot wines, 2 for $10. Let's let the festivities begin. Everything you need and more, Lee County's greatest grocery store, Farmer Joe's Fresh Market. I'd like to welcome attorney, political analyst, and multimedia commentary, Mr. Ford O'Connell. Welcome to Cracker Culture. I'm Smoking Joe. Now, forward to big news is former President Donald Trump was indicted in Miami yesterday. Crowds amassed in support of 45. However, there's always one in every crowd. And I'm going to play a clip, and I want you to talk about it. I know you've been talking about it already.
Hundreds of supporters out here around the federal courthouse in downtown Miami. And when the former president arrived with his motorcade, you had people running around the federal courthouse just trying to catch a glimpse to see if maybe he would come out on his way in. For the most part, police saying they didn't have much trouble. Most showing their support, and some against the former president. A few confrontations around the federal courthouse in Miami, but for the most part, hundreds flocking just to try and catch a glimpse.
He's not a politician. He is a good man.
Every president has kept presidential record, even Joe Biden.
They're saying that he refused to give them back.
No, don't play the game, refusing. No, that is the same.
Security tight around the courthouse. Both sides for and against Trump, calling this moment both historic and sad for very different reasons.
Let's be real. Let's call a spade a spade. The guy has gotten away with all kinds of stuff.
They've been looking for the crime in Donald Trump since he came down the escalator.
Many critiquing the felony charges here, holding signs and waving flags, at times shouting over each other. Trump is the first former president to appear before a federal judge on criminal charges. He's also leading the Republican field for the 2024 presidential nomination, and these supporters say they're diehards. They'd follow him anywhere. Police standing by at the ready to keep crowds away. All right, so there really weren't very many issues at all until right at the very end. This is video just into our newsroom. The man we actually interviewed in that piece in a jail jumpsuit, a critic of the former president, jumping out in front of the motorcade as Trump was leaving the federal courthouse. He's ultimately stopped by what appear to be Secret Service agents and police and then detained.
Come on, you know more about this guy than I do, but I don't know any man that age that can be that damn stupid to jump out in front of a presidential motorcade. I mean, he's lucky he didn't get his ass shot.
Well, let's also talk about the fact that the support for President Trump was strong. That was unbelievable down in Miami. I mean,
I seen two people that was anti-Trump in the whole crowd.
That's exactly right. And that honestly should scare Joe Biden and the Democrats because Donald Trump's support is strong. Now, to this bonehead, his actual name is Dominic Santana. He's 61 years old. I assume he's from South Florida. He basically got booked with disorderly conduct, resisting an officer without violence to his person, and obstructing traffic. He finally bonded out in 2000. Now, here's the best part, Joe. His daughter had to bail him out, and she's a Trump supporter. And people say Trump supporters aren't giving people.
When I seen that, I mean, like, you know, there's always one person. Now, before that, there was a scare early on where they thought there was a bomb threat, but that later, some guy just went and, I guess, strapped a TV to a light pole or something. They kind of washed that down, but I was saying they told them reporters they was trying to get their cameras, and the cops said, your camera ain't worth it, buddy. Go on.
Well, never underestimate the power of stupidity, nor the fact that people that actually want to be on TV. I mean, that's where we are. We're in a me culture. And frankly, the media was hoping that there were going to be a whole bunch more knuckleheads because they want every reason to say Donald Trump is a bad guy. And guess what? None of it happened yesterday, and good on Trump supporters.
Well, I want to ask you if you can give us some insight into the seriousness of these 37 counts that have Trump's been indicted upon, and what does it really mean? I mean, you know, we hear impeachment, nothing seems to ever happen. We hear, you know, investigation, nothing seems to happen. What is actually, how serious is this for?
Well, let's start from the beginning. Look, after 7.5 years of law enforcement and Congress abusing its power to get Donald Trump, the good news is Trump supporters have only strengthened their backbone and they're going to fight for him. Now, when I look at this 37 count, 49-page indictment, what do I see right off the top? I see election interference. I see selective prosecution. I see a double standard in the application of justice. And I also see malicious prosecution. That said, this is very serious in terms of the legal stakes for Donald Trump. Make no mistake about it. The DOJ wants to put Trump in jail for the rest of his life, and the president has to take the legal aspect of this very seriously, no matter how malicious it may seem.
Well, Trump, after he left the courthouse, he stopped down at the coffee shop in Little Havana. Like you said, that was a great showing of people of faith toward the former president.
It was a stroke of genius on Calle Ocho to go down there and do that. And he looked like somebody who'd been out of power and people were fighting behind him. It was so impressive. The support for President Trump at Cafe Visayas down in Miami, that Jake Tapper threw a temper tantrum on CNN and had to cut it off because he couldn't believe so many Hispanics support President Trump in Miami.
Well, you're in Miami. That's a different type of Hispanic. That's people that has lived under socialism and Marxism. They know what we're going towards. So they're going to go for the man that's going to put his foot down.
Well, that's exactly right. They may not necessarily understand the legal capacity we're talking about, but what do they see? What are we really talking about? We're talking about somebody not returning documents immediately to the National Archives, and then the person in power, Joe Biden, is going to threaten a former president of the United States by putting him behind bars. They see this for what it is. It's totalitarian rule, and that's what they fled from, and that's why they're standing behind Trump.
Well, Trump, he spoke after his indictment. I'm going to play a clip here and let you see this.
Today we witnessed the most evil and heinous abuse of power in the history of our country. Very sad thing to watch. A corrupt sitting president had his top political opponent arrested on fake and fabricated charges of which he and numerous other presidents would be guilty, right in the middle of a presidential election in which he is losing very badly. This is called election interference, and yet another attempt to rig and steal a presidential election. More importantly, it's a political persecution like something straight out of a fascist or a communist nation. This day will go down in infamy, and Joe Biden will forever be remembered as not only the most corrupt president in the history of our country, but perhaps even more importantly, the president who, together with a band of his closest thugs, misfits, and Marxists, tried to destroy American democracy. The prosecutor in the case, I will call it our case, is a thug. I've named him Deranged Jack Smith. I wonder what his name used to be, Jack Smith. It sounds so innocent, doesn't it? Jack Smith. What's his name? Jack Smith. He's a very nice man. I will appoint a real special prosecutor to go after the most corrupt president in the history of the United States of America, Joe Biden, and the entire Biden crime family.
Look, Trump's a tough SOB, man. Like I said, he's going through a lot. And it was somebody made a comment that says, as a day for anybody, you go and get indicted and you get on your own private jet with your name on it and fly to your own golf course.
And not only that, you do it on the eve of your birthday. Today is Donald Trump's birthday.
That's correct.
Welcome to possibly being charged for the rest of your life. Look, I tip my hat to him, and I don't think that a lot of people, you hear a lot of commentators on TV say, well, just get rid of Trump, find someone without the baggage. The problem is Trump is absolutely right. If Ron DeSantis were our nominee, they'd find a way to do something similar to him. And you have to stand up for this fight. I will say legally, Trump has a lot more of assets, legally speaking, at his disposal than the media gives up. I'm not going to lie to you. This is going to be a tough case. But between the Presidential Records Act, the 2012 Clinton sock drawer case, the legal opinion that you can't obstruct a non-crime, what's admissible and inadmissible in court, and what appears to be the prosecution abusing attorney-client privilege, which as a lawyer, I will tell you is the most sacrosanct thing. I'm a lot more bullish on his legal chances, but I will tell you, Joe, we are not going to have a conviction or any sort of legal ruling until after the 2024 election.
Okay, now I want to say one thing that concerns me. Now, we've got a lot of stuff coming out about the Biden family again. And Andrew McCarthy had a few things to say. I want to play what Andrew said, and then we're going to discuss this.
More, let's bring in Fox News contributor, former Assistant U.S. Attorney Andy McCarthy. Certainly a day like this nation's never seen before, Andy. But what was the biggest takeaway for you, the one thing that surprised you the most about today?
Well, I think, Dagan, it mainly went the way that it was expected. He was in and out of court quickly. I think the real tense stuff really starts to happen now. And what I just wonder is, given the political context that this takes place in, you now have this case down in Miami, the federal one. We still have the New York District Attorney's case. We have the New York Attorney General's case coming up in October for trial. It looks like the Fulton County, another elected progressive Democratic district attorney in Fulton County, will be bringing charges probably in the first or second week of August. So just looking at the politics of the campaign on all of this, you wonder how the other candidates are ever going to get traction, because there's going to be something happening in the travails of former President Trump in these cases virtually every day, if not at least every week. And they're constantly being asked about, Trump developments, and you wonder how they get their message out.
But you're right, the media is talking about Trump developments, as are we. But another huge story today, Senator Chuck Grassley says a top executive with Burisma has 15 taped conversations with Hunter Biden and 2 conversations taped with the big guy himself, or also known as the President Joe Biden. All in that alleged bribery scheme. Andy, I mean, this is huge news. If these tapes come out, if the FBI gets them or if they leak them to the media, this is a huge development in this criminal scheme by then Vice President Joe Biden.
Yeah, I don't want to get too far out in front of this, Sean, because I don't know what our proof is so far that the tapes actually exist. My understanding is that the informant that they're relying on at least heard that they exist. I don't know that, I think the FBI has been cagey when asked about whether they have them or not. But what I'd be particularly disturbed about is this document from the FBI, this 1023 form, which is the interview with the informant. It was given to the House last week. That was supposed to be in compliance with a subpoena. Evidently, we know that there were redactions because whistleblowers have come forward. And I'd really like to know, did the FBI tell the House that it was redacting important portions of this document? Because remember, they've gotten a subpoena, the FBI has, from the House. To my mind, they don't have any legal basis to withhold any information, because this is not a executive privilege situation where the executive branch can withhold information from Congress. The FBI is not in the Constitution. It was created by Congress. Congress has a constitutional obligation to do oversight and to see how the authorities that Congress grants the FBI are being exercised and how the public's money that Congress expends on the FBI is being spent. So the idea that they unilaterally decide what Congress gets to see and what Congress doesn't get to see under circumstances where we've had an FBI for 8 years that's performed in an appalling politicized fashion, I think that should get people very upset. It gets me.
I agree. I think everybody ought to get very upset. But, you know, he broke down what was going on with Trump. Then he comes in and talks about the 17 recordings, and 2 of them are supposedly Biden getting $5 million. Now, he said he's not sure if this is true. Do these tapes exist?
I don't know if they exist, but what I do know is this FD 1023 that we talk about. What that means is you've got a highly credible Ukrainian source who says Joe Biden took a bribe and sold out America to foreign nationals. That is the allegation. The question, though, is whether or not it's ever going to get beyond conservative ears and conservative voters. And this is what Andrew McCarthy was talking about that concerns me. If people knew about the foreign grifts of Joe Biden beyond conservatives, Joe Biden would be toast in the 2024 election. But Joe Biden, as Andrew McCarthy rightly points out, has 2 people in his corner. One is the Attorney General of the United States, Merrick Garland, who's basically acting as Joe Biden's bodyguard. And the other person is the special counsel, a gentleman by the name of Robert Err, who basically, believe it or not, the DOJ has been working on Hunter and Joe Biden for 5 years. But if you're not a conservative, their faces might as well be on milk cartons because no one's seen them.
And you know, something else that Andrew McCarthy said is that Trump's going to be tied up in a different lawsuit. You know, all we're going to see is a bunch of lawsuits and indictments going toward Trump. But in the same respect, why are we not seeing the same push toward the Biden family? If the left can push this towards Trump, why is the right not pushing harder on Biden?
Because the right can't get it out into the media. You've seen certain people do a good job. Our own Byron Donalds has done a good job trying to make this point on CNN. They shut him down. Senator Chuck Grassley, who is respected by both sides of the aisle, is the one who's actually been pushing this forward along with James Comer in the House. And he's respected and he's put his name behind it, but it's still not getting outside of conservative circles. And that's when I point the finger at Robert Err, our despicable media, okay, and Merrick Garland, because this is why conservatives in particular are so hacked off. This is what we mean by the double standard in the application of justice. Because if this story was about Donald Trump, I promise you, Joe, right now, we couldn't get this podcast in because we'd be watching it on TV and it would be floating across the screen. It would be noon to dawn coverage. And unfortunately, that's what we're fighting against, is getting it out there so that people know the truth.
Well, I just wonder how much of this is nothing more than political theater.
There is a lot of political theater. The problem, though, is, and this is the real destructive power of the media, is they get to choose what people hear and see through their eyes rather than the people making the choices on their own and letting the information out there. I promise you, the more people that find out about the Biden and Joe Biden family grift, foreign grift, would be really unhappy. This is why I tell Republicans, here's the message that you want to make, whoever the nominee is. We assume it's going to be Donald Trump. It could be Ron DeSantis. I don't think it's going to be anybody else. And that is, your overall message should be, make voters feel embarrassed for entertaining the idea of pulling the lever for Joe Biden in 2024. Every time he falls down the stairs on Air Force One, bring in the foreign grift. When he has senior moments, bring in the fact that he's just not mentally sharp to be president, and then talk about the foreign grift. Enter it into the conversation when Joe Biden is the topic.
Well, it's going to be interesting. Like I said, I mean, I really wish we could get down to the meat of the politics and stop all this. Like I said, I think it's political theater. I mean, you can sue anybody for anything. I mean, it seems like it's time for that to put to bed. Let's just get down to fixing the country.
Well, you know what you could blame for this besides sort of the media and the politicians? You can blame the Trial Lawyers Association because those suckers can sue you for anything. There's an old saying that Andrew McCarthy often talks about. And when it comes to a grand jury, you'll hear the media say, gee, Trump has been indicted. Well, guess what? You get the right grand jury, you can indict a ham sandwich. So the word indictment really no longer has any meaning, sort of like the word racist.
Well, and you mentioned lawyers, and I know you're an attorney, but we've got certain attorneys here that got tired of chasing ambulances and become senators.
Yeah, well, you know, I'm the attorney, anti-attorney, so to speak. So, hey, I know, and I know someone who continues to fund the Florida Democratic Party, and I believe his name's John Morgan over there at Morgan & Morgan. So, look, we have our huge problem, particularly with our property insurance, particularly in South Florida. But, you know, it's really unfortunate, I think, that when the law can be used as a political tool, and I think that's why it's a sad day that he's indicted. We never expected. That's why we talk about banana republics, Cuba, Honduras, you name it. And the reason is we never thought that could come to us. But if you step back and you were from another planet and you watch this, you'd say America's becoming a banana republic. And that's truly unfortunate.
I agree with you. Well, I want to talk about some controversy here in Lee County. I want to talk about Cape Coral right now.
Only one controversy?
Now there's several, but I got one here that I think we need to address because the people are really upset, and part of it is the fact that you know the last historic building in Cape Coral standing is the Cape Coral Yacht Club, and many people have difference of opinions. I will say that I grew up during my middle school years in the Yacht Club district. I spent many weekends over there fishing. My parents, it was close enough to my home that as kids, we'd go out and stay at the Yacht Club all night long fishing. So I got my own opinions, but I'm going to let you see what some of the community members said.
Fraser, District 5. I'm going to talk about the Yacht Club main ballroom building. The structure is as solid as a rock. It's obvious that there's been a lack of maintenance over many, many years. And we need to keep this building standing. This is the last legacy building in the city of Cape Coral that will withstand the next 60 years, 75 years, 100 years, if we maintain the structure. You must take care of the infrastructure or the building will deteriorate. But as it stands, you've seen the pictures of the roof system, you've seen pictures of the interior of this building. This structure has had virtually zero damage, very, very minimal from the hurricane. The problem with this building, and we all know it, is the plumbing, the electrical, the air conditioning has been, I don't want to say, has been neglected. I do not know the reason why, lack of funds, lack of qualified personnel. I don't know. If we don't have people in the city who can maintain our structures, maybe we need to go outside the city.
Look, again, I told you, I spent a lot of my youth at that yacht club. And even back then, there was things in disrepair that the city should have took care of. And we're talking 30, 40 years ago.
You know, Joe, I've been following this not as closely as you have, but pretty closely. As my understanding is that ballroom was built in the 1960s, long before Cape Coral became a city, you know, and I don't know how it got to this point. You know, there's some people want to turn it into a national historic site. You know, there's a lot of good arguments here. If you're going to tear it down, why don't we sit through the arguments and see what can be done and the consensus on that, rather than it appears right now rushing to demolish it.
Yeah, I agree with you. You know, I want to reserve my opinion because I think that I'm not a Cape Coral boater. Mm-hmm. And if I was, I think that my voice should be heard, and I think it should be more than a minute and a half or 3 minutes in a city council meeting, because you're not going to get your point across in 3 minutes.
Well, I think you raise a valid point. I'm not a Cape Coral voter either, but what I would say is this is a historic site in terms of Cape Coral and its formation. And rather than rush to decide one or the other, why don't you put forth all of the options? What is wrong with investigating everything that can be done? And if they decide it costs too much money at the end of the day and it's better off torn down, so be it. Why are we always seem to be careening even before the hurricane, okay, from one crisis to another, rather than honestly, objectively looking and taking into account all the assets of Cape Coral in Southwest Florida?
Well, I'll be interested to see what happens and how the council decides which way they're going to do whatever they're going to do. I want to talk to you about another local incident, but before I do, there's something I wanted to cover. And we actually have a Chinese spy base in Cuba now. All right. And I'm going to tell you that one of Biden's officials confirmed it. I'm going to show a small clip and we'll discuss that.
Alarming new details surrounding the report that China inked a deal to build a spy base in Cuba that's roughly 90 miles south of Florida. And new this morning, a Biden administration official confirming China already has military and espionage facilities in Cuba and has been using them to spy on Americans for years. It's just the latest example of Beijing's ramped up efforts to spy on the United States to make headlines in recent months. First, back in February, a Chinese spy balloon floated over a number of U.S. states. Months later, investigators uncovered a secret Chinese police station in New York City. And just weeks ago, a new report alleged Chinese spies dressed as tourists tried to sneak into a U.S. military base in Alaska. Dr. Lauren Wright is Associate Research Scholar and Lecturer in Politics and Public Affairs at Princeton University. Dr. Wright, thanks so much for being with us this morning.
Thanks, Marky. Hey.
Well, Dr. Wright, we're learning that this spy base has been in Cuba since at least 2019. So why are we just finding out about it now? And what are the chances there are other secret Chinese facilities out there that we still don't know about?
I mean, probably high. And I understand that, the knee-jerk reaction of the Biden administration with national security issues as it pertains to China is often to deny these reports first or kind of downplay them, as they did with the spy balloon. And then it sort of comes out that, yes, there are these aggressive moves by China that are plain to see by many Americans, and it's only contributing to the sense in which surveys show Americans are very worried about the threat of China. They see China increasingly not as a competitor, but as a foe. And China appears to be getting less risk averse. And so the real risk for the Biden administration is this balance between national security and transparency. And many Americans, as these news stories come out, are thinking, well, what are we going to do about this?
Right. They want answers.
Tactics are in plain sight.
Yeah.
Right.
And speaking of the Biden administration, the White House says this is part of a broader effort by China to expand its intelligence gathering operations. Beijing working to get a foothold in Africa, the Middle East, along with Latin America. What's driving this global push from China to increase its international spy operation?
Well, they have been trying to become a dominant player, both from a technological and military standpoint. And, the crux of the issue here, Marky, really is, what are we going to do about it? And the Biden administration knows there are not very many options. If you look
now, this brings back something. Me and you talked about these Chinese police departments. How are they mysteriously being placed throughout the country? They got them in Canada as well. We've got this new spy base in Cuba. Now, one of the things she said, well, they just tried to arrest some Chinese nationals coming into a military base in Alaska. Why is nobody not screaming about all the Chinese nationals coming in on our southern border with the migrants from Venezuela, from Guatemala? I put videos out. We're being invaded.
Well, believe it or not, you're going to have a good moment here, Joe. The Daily Caller is reporting today that you have a couple of Republican congressmen making the case that not only are men with ties to the Chinese military coming into the United States, but Joe Biden is releasing them into the United States as well. This is, becoming a bigger thing. That said, let me start with the obvious. I think the Biden administration is intentionally blind to what's going on with China. There's also allegations like Ukraine that the Biden crime family is taking money from the Chinese as well. Again, that's an allegation, but based on Biden's actions, that is very concerning. The other thing is, let's go back to the China spy base, because we are now talking about 90 miles off the shore of Florida. When this story first broke, the argument was the story's not true. Then, when Admiral Kirby had to admit that the story was true, what did the Biden people say? Well, we inherited it from Donald Trump. We've not been proven that it's there since 2019, because we know Trump was tough on the Chinese. My next issue is with the Biden folks, with this spy base. Okay, if you inherit it and you know about it, then why did you relax sanctions on Cuba in 2022? This is what concerns me, is that the Biden administration doesn't care that China's trying to take over the world and destroy the United States. It seems to me that they're helping them do it.
Yeah, I just can't believe that people are not just going nuts. I'm talking about everybody. I'm not talking about Republicans. The Democrats should be seeing what's happening to our country, and it's just getting thrown away. And we are definitely, if you don't think we're invaded, and people's worried about the migrants, yeah, the migrants is an issue, but not nearly as bad as these Chinese nationals coming across.
I have told you that the Chinese Communist Party is the biggest threat to America in the world in the 21st century. Heck, I've said this on 92.5 FM for nearly a decade now about the threat of the Chinese Communist Party. Why is China so successful in making sure no one learns about what they're doing, particularly in America? Very simple. They've got their hooks into our media. You go on something that is not Fox or Newsmax and talk about the Chinese Communist Party and see how long that microphone stays on. They've also embedded themselves in our universities. And basically, anytime you bring up what the Chinese are doing, they yell Asian hate. And we just know this is how they're doing it. This is how they block you from ever finding out who they are, and they've been very successful at infiltrating our media and our educational institutions and essentially the democratic mind.
Yeah, again, I think that all of America needs to, if they don't watch nothing else, all this political theater, watch what's sneaking through our borders. And I'm not talking about people from Mexico or Guatemala. I'm talking about these Chinese nationals, and they're coming over here for a reason. It ain't just for amnesty.
And you make a larger point. You and I grew up in the Cold War with the Soviets and the Chinese Communist Party, and I'm going to make a bad analogy here, make the Soviets look like a Disney movie.
Yes,
okay,
right.
In terms of what their aims are and what they're trying to do. And America needs to wake up, because unfortunately the Chinese Communist Party is already a cancer inside of America.
It's incredible. Well, on my last story of the night or day, we're going to talk about there's a push for two separate things within the Lee County Commission office. The first one is to move from 5 at-large members, each of whom are required to live and in separate districts, so that there's representation around the county for 5 individual county districts and 2 at-large districts. Now, just like what they've done with the school board, this means that you would go from voting for all 5 of the county commissioners to voting for only 1 county commissioner in your district and the 2 at-large members running. So what happens here is right now you're voting for all 5. This would mean you've got these, all 5 have a say over, they vote on everything that happens across every district. So you've got a say in all 5 of them. If this changes and they do what they're talking about, you will only have a say in the district you live in and 2 at large. So you have diminished your voter power in Lee County.
Well, let me start with the obvious, and I think it's important that people understand this. In Lee County, the county commissioners are the most important elected officials in terms of your day-to-day life. Therefore, this should not be taken lightly. And I agree with you. This is going to consolidate power and give the establishment even more power. And it's going to hurt the voice of the people in terms of keeping Lee County strong. There are many different contours to Lee County. What I would suggest is if you're going to expand it from 5 to 7, that you have 7 at large, 7 specific districts with 7 at-large county commissioners, and then let's vote from there, because it's important that you do have a voice for your specific district, but it's important that everyone has an equal voice because you are one Lee County.
Well, now what they're going to try to feed to them is that they're going to say that this gives them a vote directly for an individual that supports them, and they're not looking at the diminishing the votes that they get across the board. Now, this is really BS, and I'm going to tell you, there's a rumor around which is highly believable. This is another thing by TM Strategies, and look, the rumor is Brian Hammond is going to become the new county manager. Okay, now you're just playing a shell game. So what happens if they move Brian Hammond? They're going to push Andrew Sun in for that seat. This is all Millerites. You are still being controlled by one power source.
And it's one power source that's trying to further consolidate its power so that there is no dissension, no different view, and no voice of the people. This is a very, very concerning development, and they're going to try to play word games and tease you into thinking that you're returning power to the people. But I'll tell you, if you buy that, my friend Joe, I've got some oceanfront property in Arizona.
And I did. I didn't leave a message, but I reached out to Cecil Pendergrass today because I heard that Cecil was one of them that was opposed to this. But the problem is that vote always votes 5-0. They never, ever, there's never one person that stands up on that board.
And I think that that's the problem. You know, you need to have a voice that understands that there are multiple different areas of Lee County with very different issues. But at the same time, for the general health of Lee County, it's important for everyone to understand what's going on in the various districts. That's why have 2 at large? Let's have 7 districts and everyone be at large. And then everyone has an even better understanding of what's going on in Lee County.
Well, and again, like I said, I know what I told you. I heard that Cecil was against it. You know, I've heard a couple of the one that they questioned was Kevin Ruane. And when they said that, posed that to me, I said, why in the hell would you think Kevin Ruane wouldn't go for this new extra 2 people? He's a Millerite. He actually funds Miller's property. He owns the mortgage on Terry's property. He's not going to go against Terry.
Yeah, look, as I know, Terry and Kevin are very close. So I don't know. Again, remember, there's whisper campaigns with everything. Particularly, that's the MO of the Millerites. You know, I'm just concerned about what that means for the average voter in Lee County, and I'm not sure that is being taken into account. Of course, it's not being taken into account. They want to consolidate power, but people need to realize 2 things. When you hear something that sounds so good, you might want to dig into it, because if it's too good to be true, chances are it's not true.
100%. One thing I want to say at the end of this show, folks, you're going to see a lot of people in politics getting a lot of awards, distinction awards, exemplary awards in education. You need to look into people that gets these awards. These awards are awards that people like Terry Miller and others put them in for, which they've never really earned. And a prime example is the latest Pineapple Award recipient. Folks, I hope you have a very happy Father's Day. We love you, Florida. Ford O'Connell, Smoking Joe. We'll see you soon.